these workshops are really meant to be a real practical bridge to enable us to work out, how do we live as green Christians? How can we be disciples of Jesus Christ in how we live? And rather than trying to do lots of perfect answers, our hope and our prayer is that we can collaborate together as green Christians to work together on things like how I reduce my carbon footprint in a no blame, just a very real, genuine kind of way. And we wanted to get more people involved. If you have an idea for issues you'd like us to take forward, do talk to me, send me something, either an email or put it in the chat. And we'd be delighted to hear about you. So today, what are we going to do is we're going to have a panel discussion. Welcome to Charles, Jackie and David, Mike, John and Sharon, and just to hear from owners of electric cars, of how it's gone and your experiences of driving electric cars. We've done some work on costs and savings, instead of perhaps just ticking it all from websites and whatever. We've actually just looked at what our experience of certain cars, what does it cost us in practical terms, so we'd like to cover that as well. We're going to do, having had some discussion generally, some breakout groups, just to talk about your reflections, your thoughts on that, and then a feedback discussion from the breakout groups. And we'll probably have breakout groups. What will be good? Maybe 4 people, 5 people, something like that. I would have thought, Barbara, would be really helpful. And I was hoping we could just do now is just, first of all, I'd like to introduce our panel, really. Why don't we start with John and Sharon, and why don't you just give us a couple of minutes on how you feel about electric cars and really your practical experiences, and not just the highs. What are the lows as well? What do you drive? Just tell us.
Well, as I was saying in the breakout room, yesterday I was driving to visit one of the families I support, and I was coming back and thought, I never want to drive an ordinary car ever again. So we have a Tesla, an electric vehicle.
Ooh.
And I just thought, it's just incredible. Why would I ever want to not drive this?
Yes, we bought it in September 2019, so we've had it just over a year, it's just a completely radically different way of driving. I think it'll be interesting to see the comparison between us and other electric vehicle drivers who are on the panel, because I think a Tesla is going from an ICE car, internal combustion engine, as we refer to them. So going from an ICE vehicle to an electric vehicle is a huge leap, and a very, very different way of driving. But then within the electric vehicle world, Tesla have really thought out of the box in terms of the whole environment inside the car, how the software works. I mean, we had a software update this morning. It must be, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 software updates since we bought the car a year and a bit ago. And every time we have a software update, we get new functionality. So my car now reads me multiple texts from the same person when I'm driving. And it didn't do that yesterday. It only read the text one by one. But now if you text me multiple times while I'm driving, it'll read all of them.
Okay. So any lows? Have you got any lows to tell us about?
Any lows?
Any lows, yeah.
Anything, lows, yeah, that we don't like.
One thing, there's on the right hand side, like the indicator thing, is you go reverse or you press it down to drive. So
that's a Tesla thing, though, not
your
electric vehicle thing. That...
Yeah, you just think. But there's nothing about the electrical vehicle. But sometimes I think I want to go forwards and I've pressed it the wrong way. And I go
Okay, why don't we carry on? And Jackie, what do you drive? You and David, is that right? You need to go off mute. You're on mute, Jackie. So tell us about what you drive, your highs and lows, and your experience.
Okay, so John and Sharon are in a different league to us because we have a Nissan Leaf, first generation Nissan Leaf. David, do you want to give the sort of the spec?
It's nice trim. It drives well. It costs us 9K, which is quite a lot for a car which was how many years old? About 6 years old. Yeah, it's very, very good. But being a first generation, it has very limited range. Working 5 miles away, as I did last year, was fantastic. Working 25 miles away now gets a little bit more stressful at times. we have been let down by the infrastructure. You turn up to what should be working and find out it isn't. We've even been stuck in a town. The AA turned up. They had no idea at all how to deal with an electric car. He thought he could give me a jump start. Would you I asked him if he knew anything about electric cars. He said, he's fully trained. In the end, he had to pick up the front end and tow it back. I couldn't even get in the truck because I had COVID-19. So I got on the train and came home.
Right.
By the pub where I had a pub.
Yeah.
Right. So,
but I do want to say that's because it's a first generation car.
Yeah.
You know, things. You know, today you would buy a car, an electric car like a Leaf, and it would have a greater range. I think the battery's, you know, older. So from my perspective, it's absolutely fantastic for local driving. It's really lovely to drive. And
yeah, if you bought one now new, it would probably have a 250 mile claimed range. So yeah, there wouldn't be that problem.
Yeah, but we have had that. I don't know whether it's common to all electric drivers bar Tesla drivers, but yes, that occasional anxiety, am I going to make it? And I think for me actually what when we very first got it, particularly I became very conscious about the choices we make about convenience, because I drive to Oxford occasionally, and that means from Aldershot I stop at Beaconsfield to charge. And just so for us, it means planning and having a bit more time. And you realise how easy it is to make choices from convenience. So yes, but I don't want to paint too negative a picture, because obviously we've got an older car, and that's, you know, one of the choices we made because we wanted to get an electric car.
So one more thing. Yeah. Performance is very good. I mean, I know it's not in Tesla league, but it is nice. If we want to pull away from the lights quicker than anything else, we can. Just take it out.
I think this is
while they're changing gear, we keep accelerating.
Yeah, so, no. This is a key issue. Why don't we ask Charles? Tell us about your experience. You're a Leaf driver as well, I believe, aren't you?
Yes, we're Leaf drivers. Prior to that, we had 2 Toyota Priuses. We had a battery problem after 21 years and had difficulty getting replacement parts, it being what's called a grey import, so it wasn't supported by the European Toyota network. So we replaced one of them with a Nissan Leaf, and we're very happy with it and delighted. I've also had an electric bike for about 15 years, so it's a bit horses for courses. We have a second-hand Leaf which we've used for short journeys.
Yeah, no, that's good. So, and your highs and lows?
Well, the low with the previous vehicle was it was a wonderful 21-year-old car, but its battery failed after 21 years.
21 years, that's not bad, actually. That's a pretty good low, I would have thought.
Well, yes.
You know, so that's it. Okay, that's helpful. And then, I think last on our path, Michael.
Hello. Yeah.
Do you want to
say
tell us about your own experience, highs and lows?
Yeah, well, I'm also a Leaf driver, but I've got a second generation one, which I bought in 2017. So driving it 3.5 years. That's got a range in summertime of about 110 miles, which is really good. So most of the time for commuting and longer commuting, I don't have to charge with that. And then if I go on longer drives, I will be using rapid chargers. which it's about every 2 hours or so I need to charge on a longer drive, which is about as long as my bladder would last, to be perfectly honest. And it's nice to have a cup of coffee at that point. Incidentally, for older Leafs, we're now there are people upgrading the batteries, so they've sort of become the Fairphones of the car world, which is interesting. But yeah, like other people said, good acceleration, very smooth. I found it really restful to drive from that point of view. I'm calculating, I'm charging at home 99% of the time. My charger tells me how much electricity, so I can calculate how much that's costing me. I'm saving about £1,000 a year driving 1,100, 1,200 miles, compared with diesel, you know, 50 miles a gallon, that sort of thing. Nothing much goes wrong. The servicing is really cheap, so I'm actually going to a Nissan garage at the moment because that's the only one I can find around here. That's 150 a year for servicing. Tires last longer, I have to say, which is good. One of the nice things in the winter, you can program it to be warm before you get in. Ooh. So that's rather nice. And also, if you forget to do that, the heater will instantly go on, as opposed to, you know, that sort of 5-10 minutes when you're feeling absolutely frozen in an ice car. What else? Yeah, I have to say, I'm in awe of people driving the smaller the smaller battery leaves 30k kilowatt hour. I've been able to do it, and it's actually it's more of a fun to drive because it's a bit of an adventure when I go on longer journeys, because you actually have to use something like ZapMap. There are lots of apps to do, and think, well, I'll stop there and I can stop there. And to be perfect, I've never been caught out. There have been times when I found something isn't working, but then you just have a backup and go from there.
Yeah.
So yeah, all positive really.
Okay, well, I think it'd be really good to open up to some questions, but not quite yet. I see, Andrew, as usual, you've been putting some corking good questions into the chat, so we'll pick those up in due course. What I thought would be useful, actually, bear in mind there's a lot of stuff going on, is that we maybe look at the costs and then go into breakout groups just for maybe 10 minutes. Will that be enough to talk about the key issues, and then come back and have the panel discussion about the issues thereafter, because that will help to distill what's really going on for each of you. So let me just share screen with you again, and I'm glad to say that I've had some help from a number of you on thinking about benefits, issues, options, and costs. Now, I'm a bit cynical, I must admit to you at times, regarding you know, what you read in magazines and papers. I like to see it myself. I like to get my hands on the figures and know and understand the numbers directly. So what we've done is our experience, and I've gone through some of the detail, and with help from particularly Charles and John, we've sort of got a few costings and a few thoughts for you to feed into the group. So let me take you through that. So what I've got here is a tale of 3 cars cost comparison. And what I've done, first of all, we had a Volvo V40 diesel, like someone else. We were being goodies, you know, we were doing the right thing for the environment. Little did we know, a couple of years later, we aren't doing the right thing for the environment. We also had a Mini, 2 car family, a petrol Mini, which will take about a minute. And we got rid of those 2 and bought a Kona, which we're very, very pleased with. And one of the key things for us is eye-wateringly expensive. We've never paid anywhere near amount for anything like a car for that. It was like really raid the piggy bank to do it. But it was a very hard thought. And because of the business, we said we do a high mileage. Can we make this work? And what this is if you're doing 20,000 miles per annum, and you buy a new car and you run it for 8 years, it works through the cost. So if you go through the first block and you look at the Volvo V40, costs 26,000. You run it for 8 years, and I've standardized on 8 years at the moment. That's because that's how the battery life of the Kona and the sort of the guarantee on the battery. That gives you a depreciation of 3,250, 16 pence. That's how much did you pay for the car and how much is when it's worth nothing, and you spread it over those years. Then I looked at the fuel. I looked at doing a lot of miles, 20,000. We're on Octopus Go, 5 pence per kilowatt hour if you do it at night, which it'll do. So we end up paying a penny a mile for our running costs. As Michael was saying, the maintenance costs are really low. And what you get is, out of that point, you get 32, sorry, for the Volvo, working through it, 32 pence a mile. For the Hyundai, I'm at 26 pence a mile. So there's this myth that it's more expensive. Well, it can be, but we'd like to explore that. John helped me on the Tesla, and it's a similar kind of thing if you do enough miles. So there's a real key issue here. And what I've done here, I'm a strategist, I'm an analyst of data, is I've said, well, for those 8 years, if you've got two types of cars, one that does 20,000 miles and a Volvo D40, and the Hyundai electric does 20,000, and then you do the same model for 6,000 miles a year over 8 years, you get to some interesting results, which should derive some of our decisions. So the thick blue line is our Volvo, if we'd run it for 8 years. The dark green line is the Hyundai, and for 20,000 miles, what you find is the blue line is higher in terms of the total cost of running that car for 8 years than the thick green, the electric car. However, if I only drive it for 6,000 miles, then you're on the light blue line for the Volvo and you're on the light green line for the Kona, and you end up being more expensive for the electric car. And that's because the battery costs a lot, particularly if you want the good range. The Kona has a range of 279 miles. Then, as a part of the analysis, I actually looked at the green line is what happens to the electric car, in cost per mile, and the blue line is what happens to the Volvo in terms of how many miles. In terms of our costs, what we found is the break-even point. When you get to 10, 11,000 miles per year over 8 years, it becomes cheaper to run the electric car than it is to run the diesel car. Now, there's lots of things going on here, but I just wanted to sort of raise that as one of the key issues in consideration. Mark Dick, thank you very much for sending me emails earlier today from the Climate Change Committee. There is a clear expectation that the batteries, which is what costs an extra 10,000 typically, are going to basically halve in price over the next 10 years or so. And so there's a whole new scenario coming. One, electric cars are going to get cheaper. So instead of paying an extra 10,000, maybe I can expect to pay an extra 5,000. Secondly, the running cost is so much less. And the third aspect is, because everybody wants a high range electric vehicle at the moment, you're paying top dollar for that vehicle. So nearly finished. The last one, with Charles's help, is we said, what about 2 second-hand cars? An interesting thing came out. If you buy the mini hatchback that we had before, compare it to the Nissan Leaf, you buy it 4 years old, and I got all this from price comparison sites. You sell it at 7 years old, and you run it again with Octopus Go. It's the cheapest way to run a car. Bear in mind the key disadvantage, the inconvenience, that the real range is you have a big range inconvenience that's sitting in there. So let me just stop that piece. Sorry to blitz all that to you in one go. What I suggest we now do, for how long do we need, do you think? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Why don't we just take a breakout group for 10 minutes, Barbara, and just talk about all of that stuff that you've heard. what are your impressions? What do you feel good about? What are the issues? And then maybe elect a chairman and or a chairperson, I should say, and come back and help us to lead the discussion with a panel as we take it from there. Good. Well, welcome back, everyone. I'm just seeing, hopefully you've had a good discussion. I can see Michael, I can see John and Sharon. I can't see Charles or Kathy, but let's, Jackie, let's open up and just see what are the key issues that came out of your working group. So who would like to start?
So in our group, we were concerned about the environmental issues, particularly in Colombia, and recognised it wasn't just perhaps lithium, but other products as well. And I talked a little bit about one of the vehicle manufacturers and their ethical standards. Okay, and is there a particular question that the group wanted to raise and sort of I mean, you mean ethical in terms of, because that came up in our group, you know, that are these things being made properly, et cetera, so and you know, are children being used in it, and how does that work environmentally? Well, yes, it was within our group, and my experience was with Volvo Truck and Bus that I worked for about 10 years. And they are setting a standard for themselves and their suppliers of what was the Millennium United Nations goals, and they are forcing their suppliers not to exploit either.
And Stefan, a quick question came up in our group too. Helen, I don't know what your husband's name is. Would you like to come in and repeat to the wider group what you said to us, please? If you can unmute yourself.
I take scientific magazines regularly, mainly because I've been a researcher all my life till I retired. And it does seem that at the moment there's a huge amount of research going on, and that research is already getting batteries which are a lot more efficient, a lot cheaper, don't use lithium in some cases. And it's just a matter, because it will be just a matter of time before they actually bring them up to the standard required. So I think that most of the battery problem will disappear, but how long I couldn't guarantee, obviously.
Yeah, there for sure is an enormous amount of development. I was sharing with our group. My son is a principal engineer in Williams Advanced Engineering, a battery engineer, and it's just it's amazing this kind of speed at which things are developing. Michael, I would very much like to hear your perspective on the ethical issues around batteries and slave labor and all that good stuff. What's your view?
Well, I think it's really important to understand and to recognize it. I think you have to, in some extent, put this in the context that we found in the last few years that there's been a pushback against electric cars from the diesel and petrol car manufacturers. They've got an awful lot, billions invested in their car plants. So it's a bit like the tobacco lobby or the carbon denying, the climate change denying lobby. So that's been there have been some serious things. The issue with cobalt, yeah, that comes from particularly, there was a 2016 Amnesty International report looking at cobalt mining in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, and it is certainly true. The thing is, if you then do the maths and look back, and this has actually been done by the lead researcher from Amnesty International, the amount that actually goes into electric car batteries is being put at 0.1%. And therefore 99% of it, you can say, is not coming from that. Now, we want to strive to actually have nothing coming from there, but it's one of those ethical dilemmas of living in the world that we have. We have to balance things. The other things also with cobalt to realize is that cobalt's actually used in the manufacture of diesel and petrol. to desulfurize it. So you're not cobalt free if you're driving an electric or diesel car. It's also possible to remember that we can recycle batteries. So recycling is at 90 to 95% level. So the cobalt can go be recycled, as can the lithium and every other component. You can precisely recycle 0% of any petrol or diesel that you extract. And that is worth recognizing. And also just remember that your petrol and your diesel is coming out of places like the Niger Delta, and the appalling things that have been going on there. You know, two wrongs doesn't make a right, but it's the reality of how can we work in that way. I think one of the things, I'm not a complete electric car fanboy. I'm very much wanting to walk and wanting to cycle when I can. And I suppose the other thing which came up in our group was to say that there's a lot of reflection now, and the way forward in the longer term is to the idea of shared transport. So rather than an ownership model where each of us buys a car and it sits outside, how can we share things which would reduce the number of batteries we need, for example? So yeah, that's going into a different area. But happy to have some comeback if people got it.
I think one thing that came up in our group, I'd like some feedback from the panel from, is that you know, it's one thing to say, well, actually, we can get sustainable electricity, and gradually electricity get greener and greener as we get more and more proper windmills and things making that work. And so my car's running, but actually you've still got to make the flipping thing, and the footprint of making the car is significant, isn't it? And I know, you know, at least I'm not putting thousands and thousands of tons of petrol, you know, litres of petrol into and burning that, but I've still got to make the thing. Any views from the panel on that? Yes, Michael.
Well, there's an organisation called Transport Evolved, and they've done the maths on this as well and looked at it. And they've compared an average diesel car to an average electric car running in Poland, which is about 80% dirty electricity, and also in Sweden, which is about 80% renewable. And over lifetime, they're coming out about 24 to 28% reduction in total CO2 emissions, including that in Poland. And it rises hugely when you get into a country with greener electricity as well. So I would say actually it's still looking positive for the electric.
And society has to change how it manufactures things. I mean, you know, to me, what can I do? I can demand an electric car, or I can, if I'm doing a lot of mileage, and actually it's not as simple as electric good, not electric bad necessarily. But if I do, I can do that. I can cycle more. I can use an electric bike. I can do all that kind of stuff. But then I can demand that the suppliers change, and that I buy from. You know, we talked about Volvo, for example, as about the ones who care about these things and who care about where the battery comes from and who care about all that stuff. That's part of an evolution, isn't it?
Stefan, one thing I think that we've both become much more conscious of when we got an electric vehicle is conserving energy. So an electric vehicle has, whatever electric vehicle you get has software in it which will help you to see what your consumption is. And of course, you're thinking about range all the time. And so now on a motorway, we don't think anything of sitting at 60 miles an hour for the duration of, you know, a long drive, because we know that it's a much more fuel efficient speed to sit at. It's less stressful to drive at. There's less risk, obviously, at a lower speed. You're doing less overtaking. So I think there's also a culture shift that goes on when you move to a source of energy like electricity, particularly if you're charging it at home, where you're managing your own electricity supply. So you start to become much more energy conscious. And I think you know, a lot of people who've got electric vehicles will also have solar panels. That seems to be a common thing. So, I put in the chat earlier that between March and October, we have surplus electricity, and we can run our electric vehicle almost entirely off solar. And so, just thinking about that environmental impact and whether you walk or you take the car or whatever, all of these things are in our head now. Whereas I think with petrol, there was a kind of throwaway attitude to energy. People flying down the motorway at 75, 80, and the amount more energy they're consuming than they would if they were at 60. And it really doesn't save you any more time.
It's true. It's absolutely true. Debbie,
I'm so excited listening to what John has said, because the same things have been happening to us over the 3 years that we've had one and then a medium range Nissan Leaf, that our driving and our traveling experience has been much calmer. The same thing about going at 60. It has happened to us, along with the experience of this year, where you don't have to go to places. You can go on Zoom. You don't have to go to meetings. You can see it online. It's not quite the same, but often I think that after the pandemic is over, we will hold on to a lot of the changes, which have meant that we're just not doing the miles. We've done an incredibly low mileage this year, and similarly, our solar panels and our home charger mean that it is virtually free energy in the summer months, and it feels good and very peaceful.
Wonderful.
Stefan, could
Yes,
I
Mark.
share
Go for it, Mark.
the UK life cycle graph that I sent you? Could I do that? Because I think it brings together. Let me just see. Am I allowed to do that? Screen sharing? No, I'm not allowed to share screen. Sorry.
There we go. We've done that now.
Have we?
Well, I'm looking to find your name. Sorry.
I've made multiple sharing available.
Okay, fine.
Okay, let me see. Ken, does that come up? I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah. So let you study that for a minute. So this is 2020 now, 10 years time, and 2050. Obviously, the ICE cars drop off these two categories. But this is battery production, the car production, and range estimates for the BEVs, and you can see that it's even favourable now for hybrid vehicles, and especially electric vehicles, and becomes even more so as time progresses. And so that's how the breakdown of the lifestyle emissions from those vehicles in production and fuel use breaks down, projected from the Committee on Climate Change.
It is good work, and as someone was saying today, the only issue is they're still talking 2050, but at least they have got some sensible kind of analyses that sit in there. Thank you for that, Mark.
Jackie had her hand up.
Yes, Jackie, please.
I just wanted to make the point that the capital cost of a electric car is very high, but we don't have to buy. We can also lease.
Yeah.
My boss at work is going for a Renault Zoe, capped at 10,000 miles a year for £240 a month, with no maintenance cost, and all he has to pay for is the electric. So we don't necessarily have to go down the route of a very expensive capital cost.
Thank you for that.
No problem.
And Andrew Craig, I mean, you always give us corking questions. What's the big issue on your mind that you'd like to ask us?
Put one in the chat.
Let's have it verbally. You're muted, Andrew.
The big issue is that I'm waiting for my wife to be ready to buy an electric car. She has rather some anxieties. In fact, I really hope I'm going to be able to persuade her just to sit down and actually look at this discussion later on, Stefan. So it is just things like over the range. You know, you have to plan your journeys. Long journeys might take longer. And she's worried about the expense. She's you know, still wants to be convinced about that. I think getting into the supply chains of the battery manufacturers and actually working out, I think a lot of actual electric vehicle drivers coming on and starting to lobby the motor industry could be quite powerful to actually help looking at the mining operations and the battery manufacturing operations wherever they are.
And you're absolutely right. This has to, this will expand as we make those questions, and as this consciousness grows. I mean, you look, we said in our group, I started off and we heard about people abusing children in terms of manufacturing clothes, but I don't go naked as a result. No. I just don't buy from the people who do that, you know, and we have that influence. The reality is that the tick with the electric cars is that you're not burning all that fossil fuels. Now we need to put the pressure on to see the manufacturing process turned right, turned sustainable, and recognize that, yes, it is expensive, but it's not for everyone, because it is expensive. And for, you know, you may, if you've got enough mileage, it works. So the Renault Zoe that David just mentioned, you know, what do? They mean you lease your battery throughout the period so that you can actually make it afford. Now, so Alison, don't like that, and Helen has a good question.
Not on the new Renault Zoe.
Okay.
The new ones, you buy the battery, and they've done away with the leasing of batteries.
Okay, Helen, thank you for that.
Yeah, I was just asking. I mean, I'm quite sort of well aware of how to do the campaigning for many issues, particularly sort of clothing brands through Tradecraft Exchange. I don't know how to lobby the motor industry. Is that something Green Christian could look at or provide links to in their prayer diary or something like that?
Very good one. Thank you for that. I don't know the answer.
Stefan, I just want to interject. This isn't about leasing the battery. This is about leasing the whole car.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay.
Yes, and what they're trying to do is spread the cost of having to do a big upfront purchase, because the issue is the economics works if you do over 10,000 miles. The economics works. It's just that we're not used to paying an extra 10,000 for a car. Look, I am very aware that our time is running out. Thank you for stunning numbers of contributions. I would just like to propose, I'm sorry to cut it through, that we finish in prayer, and if some of you want to stay on and keep the chat going, we can absolutely do that. But let's just share the screen and just finish with a word of prayer, just looking to Advent. Lighten our darkness, we beseech thee, O Lord, and by thy great mercy, defend us from all perils and dangers of this time, for the love of thy only Son, our Saviour, Jesus Christ. Amen. Well, thank you all so much for your time. It's a fast romp through all these things, but the benefit is you get to go back to your televisions, families, or whatever you're going to do. God bless you all.
Thanks, Stefan.